Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, Bros and Bronies and Pegs is the one, the only, of course, Nintendo Free 2011, and of course, all other good stuff. If you haven't seen part 2, we're going back into part 2. So, I know it wasn't over 30 minutes, so it was 29 minutes, 30 seconds, but you know what? As we were, let's continue. I think Scribbler was still talking.
Loud enough to force her to do things, had to take a physical role, but it was all
this is almost all on the same day, too.
Spell that was cast when she was younger to give her a cutie mark, and the way I interpreted it was her father and mother had cast a spell to make sure she had music as her talent, and therefore everything that came afterwards was actually their own fault, because the spell was forbidden magic of some description.
A dark
see, that's when the demon entity of the puppet master, puppeteer started controlling her. I remember that. A lifetime
of misery and torment, but it was because the spell was literally pulling the strings from now on.
It is more than just your inference that parents cast the spell. It is spelled out, not entirely explicitly in the text, but in the final chapter it is made pretty clear that at least that's Octavia's conclusion, that the parents had cast the spell on her. I didn't get that.
I went back to the beginning and saw the conversation her parents had after she'd been upstairs.
Sorry about that loud noise. I can't do anything about that because that's Scribbler's microphone messing up.
Octavia believes that her parents know what this dark entity, whatever it is, and that's part of why they're suddenly so afraid of her, because they know what it can do.
The song that she heard, it was chanting in the beginning. If anything, I believe it was chanting from her father and mother, performing the dark ritual art. We never get the explanation or see what's up in the attic from Octavia's point of view.
And there is that moment where Vinyl says,
that was really interesting to me too. They never talked about the attic ever.
And Octavia can't answer her.
I think the fic would have been a whole lot better if it was more focused on the strings themselves and the actual spell.
Yes.
Yep, I completely agree with that.
When you started talking about the ending, I thought it would also be a good idea for us to point out that the beginning of the fic, the very first thing that you see, which I absolutely hate when a story does this, the beginning is the end. The very first section of the very first chapter is basically telling us that there is no hope in this story, and everything we are about to read is a foregone conclusion. It is telling us how this story is going to end before we even start to get it rolling.
Yes, and I thought that worked really well, personally. I think that the author is clearly trying to create an atmosphere of hopelessness and despondency, and that works really well for that. If you don't like that style of story, then I have to say that's more an issue with your preference of story than an issue with the author
That's
itself.
pretty much your personal opinion and thoughts and overall feelings about the whole story. That's what it is.
During the whole fic, making you think, oh, there's something good happening here. You've got a relationship going. Octavia's safe with Vinyl and such like that. And of course, it backtracks back to the parents.
Hopefully,
the other thing you have to remember is that the ending we're shown at the beginning isn't the very final note of the story. The ending we get at the beginning is just after the entity, whatever it is, has killed her parents.
The puppeteer.
The puppeteer, I think that's probably the best sort of word for it. And there is still the most significant aspect of the ending does follow that, in my view.
I have to point out a plot hole with the ending.
Yes?
The opening starts with her sitting there writing music with the dead bodies of her parents around her. That doesn't happen in the end of chapter 3. She passes out straight after they've died and Vinyl finds her. Vinyl never leaves her sunglasses behind. She doesn't sit there writing music. None of that happens. She wakes up in Vinyl's apartment.
Yeah, it does feel like that ending was significantly changed, and then the author didn't go back and make the necessary alterations.
It does. But the other thing that I just wanted to say about the true ending of it was it felt really rushed.
It did. It really did, yeah.
I wanted to add
I can really agree with Obath Scribbler when she says that. It felt like everything got rushed and cluttered in together. If any people, like I said, this is coming from someone that's seen all 3 of the chapters and I've listened to all of them, so definitely check it out like I always do. Put the link down below. Description box below, obviously. Yeah, it felt really rushed and cluttered out. I don't know, it's like the author or the illustrator that was writing this whole story, it's like they didn't really have time to make Octavia, really put much emphasis inside of her character development, the character development side of her story. I feel like that was a little like push versus shove. Push comes to shove, just make her any type of character. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion on it. And I don't know what it was, because they do talk about her like playing the harp strings and a lot of like real professional Mozart and like Shakespeare and all that, and Beethoven type of music from like almost 1,000 years ago. Hey, so I can see where Scribbler's coming from that viewing standpoint.
I found when I read the opening, the very opening of the story, where we see the main character Octavia in amongst the shredded bodies of her parents. As I read the story, I was like,
that was
so it's
real
going to have a
gruesome,
happy ending then. Of all the endings the story could have,
what
her
can I say?
horrible, abusive
That was real
parents getting
sad,
shredded
like,
to
seeing
vapor
those
is
pictures in my
probably
head
one of the
there.
better outcomes. I was quite pleased. But no,
Emotions
no,
really
it goes
pulled my
really
heartstrings out,
bad
man.
places.
You know, honestly, when I first read the beginning, and I do agree with Scribbler that the ending does feel rushed and changed, because I actually had to reread the ending to make sure I read it right, because it was like, wait a minute, something's off. Why is it Vinyl's just leaving? Just like the whole scenery was changed, so the author didn't go back and edit that part.
Regardless of the sunglasses on the nightstand, the one way I could see that the epilogue at the beginning, the only way I could see that fitting is if the shredded remnants of her parents was occurring. This
I completely
was days
forgot what
after
remnants
the
means. I
tragic
think it's
events, and
just fancy
no
word
one
for
had
skin.
cleaned up
Flesh.
the wreckage of her family.
I did wonder about that. If it could be that she's gone back after Vinyl's left her in the theatre and she goes home.
That seemed kind of disappointing because the parents had sent all the staff away right at the end of the story.
Oh yeah, I
Sometimes
remember
maybe they
that
just never
scene. That
came
was
back.
He still
real
didn't explain
It's
Yes,
still,
emotional.
so
it's
that's
like,
a
Real
it's
heartfelt
basically
scene
just a
there.
thing that
Because
didn't
the
get fixed.
butcher,
Yeah.
butler guy was
We
always
have
trying to
the
look out
point
for her. He had
of
her
the
bent
concept
interest
that
in
the
her.
ending is
Interests her,
paramount.
excuse me.
So, how do we feel the ending affected the overall story that we'd read?
It made it feel really, really disappointing and unfulfilling. The ending should have been the full stop to the story that explained the things that needed explaining and gave you a sense of, if not satisfaction, then at least made you feel that you hadn't wasted your time. Whereas I had to go back and reread things and then infer a lot to understand some of the things, the narrative
Yeah, she had to
hooks
understand the whole
that had got me
concept,
to read it that far.
I don't
whole-
agree with Scribbler
whole
there
fan
that
fiction,
the
that's
ending
what it
should
was.
have explained things that needed explaining. Mainly because the author is clearly trying to tell a sort of Lovecraftian, unknowable cosmic horror tale, and a big aspect of that is that you can't know some things. Some of these things are just incomprehensible. At least that's my understanding of that type of fiction.
I'm going to take Scribbler's side on this
I can agree
because
with that.
I don't think that the author was intentionally going for an unknowable Lovecraftian sort of deal with this. And it just makes me all the more annoyed when, once again, we have a start of the story that is a foregone conclusion, topped off with a very lackluster ending that just left me confused and angry, more so than I already was by the end of this.
The author does explicitly say that style is inspired by H.P. Lovecraft, so I don't think that saying that the author wasn't going for that is that really valid. Sorry.
See, I don't necessarily read a lot of the author's notes most of the time, and I've read a lot of H.P. Lovecraft, and I really did not get the feeling that
Yeah, I can agree with them there. Sometimes I really don't read the author's notes very much either because, so I'm not saying that it's irrelevant or rude or disrespectful. I just like, I want to go in blind when I read a fan fiction story. All right, let's continue.
that was what he was going for. Well, I was just simply reading the story.
Actually, I agree with Saucy on this because I'm used to reading creepypastas and horror stories, and the fact that they left
narrated,
out parts,
this girl right here.
it's kind of expected for me within
this
this
chick right
story.
here.
To not get the
This
full
one.
picture of, like, why isn't this explained? It's kind of accepted.
I'm going to interject an opinion here and say that I'm walking kind of a middle ground. The idea in a Lovecraftian horror, it's gothic horror. The monster is entirely unknowable,
I've actually
and
heard of
nothing that
gothic
any
horror
of the
before,
characters
so
in
I'm
the
a little
story
new to
can
that.
do
No.
will
Oh, it's
ever
something new
illuminate
to
what
me.
exactly has happened. It's kind of the concept is that the truth is completely unknowable to those who are sane or human.
The uncanny.
The uncanny, thank you. Saying that, I think that it was uncomfortably placed in the story. I think that as I read the final two chapters, final two sections, shall we say, where the entity takes control of Octavia, and the epilogue where we find out that Octavia has 60 years of awful torment at the hands of the creature, I enjoyed that from a horror perspective. I thought that that really deserved a much better story to have happened beforehand. In
You guys
a
might hear a
Lovecraft
text
story,
message 'cause I
what
was
we
texting
don't
with my
get
buddies,
is,
so
very much
apologies for
human
that.
intention.
You
What
might
you
hear a
get
phone call
is
too.
the uncanny and its effect on humans and human intention. You have cultists and you have interference with the
I
great
actually have
powers.
no idea what that
And what
is.
we had for most of
To
the
be honest with
story
you, sorry,
was Octavia being used as a punching bag. and I felt that sat very uncomfortably with a much more interesting story that this ending gave us, which was this idea of this inexplicable monster.
Maybe it was just that it felt rushed. I mean, like some of you guys were saying before, perhaps if they had fought against it in some way, perhaps nearly overcame it, maybe found a weakness and it defeated Octavia and Vinyl to really set its place in that you cannot overcome this.
Finding a way to drive home the point of not being able to fight it, or it's hopeless or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, like perhaps if there was a strong internal struggle in Octavia's mind and like you could see that her thoughts, her conscience were like literally locked away in her mind
I gotta say
by
something about
these
that.
strings.
Yeah, her mind was really screwed up. She was mentally insanely crazy when she really wanted to get tortured or destroyed or like have like physical abuse go on her mother, because she would always use her magic to slap the crap out of Octavia to make her hurt, to scratch her up a little bit. They had a lot of cat fights, or in this case, pony fights. Alright, let's keep going.
Really narrow in the fact that it is over for her.
It sounds strange, but I'm getting flashbacks to Yu-Gi-Oh! With that. The idea that when terrible things happen, the actual character is locked away, and this sort of entity takes
Yu-Gi-Oh!
over.
I was a fan of the anime series, but I didn't care too much of the cards. I'm sorry, guys.
Because
I know there's some
majority of
Pokemon
it
fans that are
came
Yu-Gi-Oh! fans,
during
but that's
the
a whole other
ending,
video.
or near the end. It felt like another element that had to be really rushed through. An example of it being pulled off well is the Ice King in Adventure Time. I felt that his backstory was much better
I'm not
pulled
even
off,
get into
and
how...
he goes through something very similar to
I hate
Octavia
that
having her
freaking show.
consciousness
It's
locked
crap.
away
I'm
like
sorry.
that.
Yeah, I will admit that's a very good point. The moment that's done
I'm
well
gonna go into maybe a super
modern
rant on that
animation,
one day on my
Ice King
criticism
is a very
guy channel.
tragic character.
I just want to really
comment
agree
for
with Goombasa there, just because think back to when Octavia first auditioned for the orchestra. She just mentioned, like the narrator just mentions, which is Octavia, just mentions out of the blue, oh hey, there's gossamer lines coming down with hooks. How they hurt, but they're helping me play. It just sort of felt like
I
it
remember
just
the
rushed
gossamer.
through there.
Those guys were
She didn't
really
put thought into
ballistic
what the
when they
hell are
controlled
these things,
Octavia's
where are they coming
strings.
from?
That's what
Should
it
I
was.
be
From
scared?
the
Should I
puppeteer.
be happy that they help me? Why
Those
do
guys
they hurt
were
so
wild.
much? Is this going to be a constant thing? Just seemed like
Entities
something
at
that
this
was kept
point.
in the background until it was convenient enough to be in the foreground.
Oh, I agree.
I agree. as
I
well.
agree too. I'd forgotten about that moment, but yeah, they should have. If they were going to do that, they should have left it out until the moment that she tried to
Yeah,
ignore
that's
the
right.
music in her head.
You can keep the
I agree
entity
with that, too.
mysterious, except having Octavia's
Scribbler's just a
feelings,
female,
reactions,
beautiful
thoughts
genius, man.
about
She's
it
awesome.
would have made it so
You're not
much better
subscribed
if
to
she
this
was
girl
like
right here,
terrified of
Scribbler?
him. Yeah, her
Definitely
relationship
check
with
her
him
out.
more than just,
here.
oh, the strings will come and get me again. Oh, the strings will come back if I don't write. It would have added so much more to it.
I was just going to put a button on it and just say a lot of your opinions of a story that you've read or something that you've interacted with in any kind of media is shaped by your final exposure to it. If something ends badly, you can think badly of it, even if it was very good up to that point, and vice versa. A poor story can be saved by a good ending. I think the biggest sin of this fic is that its ending is nothing like its middle.
Kind of sounds like cinema
So if
Sims
you
right
enjoyed
there.
the
A lot of
middle,
people know
you
who
will
that
not
guy
like
is.
it
He's
at
a
the end of
giant
it.
movie reviewer
And if you
on
don't like
YouTube.
the middle,
Almost as big
you
as
will
Johnny
come away
Jones.
wishing you had more like the end that you've just read. And I think that's the largest problem.
Yeah, I think you've just summed up my main problems with this in that I really enjoyed the ending and the middle just felt massively disjointed, mainly because the characters' reactions to events just didn't make any sense to me, and the middle of the story is built around the sort of relationship between these characters and the relationship between Octavia and her parents and the relationship between Octavia and Vinyl, and you've got the other peripheral characters like Lyra, Bon, and the butler. The characterization in this was utter shite, let me say that right now, in my opinion.
Okay, let's go through.
Oh, I
what
didn't think they
characters
were
do we
pure
have in
crap.
the story?
They were
we have
pretty
the mother
decent.
and father of Octavia. We have Octavia
I felt
herself.
like they were designed
There's
as a
Vinyl
very good
Scratch in
concept,
this
except for
particular
Octavia a little
interpretation. We have
bit.
Lyra and
Hers is a
Bon
little
Bon.
crap, but not too
We
crappy.
have the butler, who serves as something of a friend to Octavia.
Butters.
No.
No, it was the chef who was a
Chef,
friend.
like
But
you.
they had an uneasy truce. But the chef was her
Chef was
friend.
her friend and served as
Oh, he's the one that had
confidant.
like the
Did
southern,
we
like
have any
American
other major
accent. I
characters?
remember that.
Not really.
The
Apart
butler,
from
the one that sounds like
Boulder and-
Texas or Louisiana
Apart
There
type
weren't
from-
any
accent.
characters, they were plot
Had
devices.
howdy,
They were
owl,
plot
that
devices,
type
yeah.
of thing.
Then
I
again,
remember
most
that.
of the characters were plot devices.
Definitely
rather
recall
than
him.
characters in this.
They may have been ciphers rather than characters,
Yes.
but they were there.
Going over the characters in general, I wanted to say that I find every single character in this story completely reprehensible. Even the characters I am supposed to care about. Which is another thing about this story that really made me mad, is the fact that I didn't care
I
about
find them pretty
anybody during
forgivable,
this
not
story.
really reprehensible,
Not a
in my
single
opinion.
one of them. Even Octavia, which I think is a pretty big deal when she's not only the main character, but is also the one narrating the story. And I didn't care about her at all.
Yeah, I'm going to make a point here just to say that I kind of agree with you. I didn't think anyone was characterised in a way that made me actually care. No one was acting like a human being, as it were.
In particular, the ones that most sort of wound me up were the parents. The parents in this are just... What in Equestria is going on with these utter psychopaths?
I loathe them. I hated them. My emotions were on a roller coaster throughout the whole time, especially when it came down to the parents.
Oh yeah, and
Preach, my
definitely,
brother.
my
Nice,
emotions were
Trophicus
really,
pointed out,
really
yes,
immersed into
that the
this like
parents are
fan fiction. I
despisable,
was,
but that's because
I was
of the
really
fic itself,
loving the fan
because
fiction
every
a lot,
story or
and this
every other
story,
story has to have
for
a
sure.
good villain. And sadly, they're not that good of a villain.
They are...
I think the villain is perfect in my opinion.
cartoonishly
That's the thing.
evil in this. They don't act like cartoon characters, but the level of abuse that they are leveling against their daughter, the way that they are acting, it's completely unrealistic to believe that people like this, or ponies like this, could be allowed to continue in this way. I don't care how much money they have, I don't care how famous they are, I don't care how careful they are. I find it completely unbelievable that anybody like this could even exist without having any sort of repercussions before they get brutally murdered.
I actually have a quote from the mother, if you want. The mother cooed. I just love you so much, and you don't have orchestra practice for 3 whole days. I have a very, very, very special...
Oh, the mother was a huge
I'm
bee
going to
in this
find out
freaking
exactly
thing.
how
In
much
this
pain
fan
it takes
fiction
to
of
make an
MLP.
Earth pony pass out. And then I'm going to do it again, on the hour, every hour, until orchestra practice on Monday. That should ensure your
Alright,
loyalty.
I'm gonna make this one a little shorter, so stay tuned for part 3 in this video. I got a really huge topic to say about that, as there is real child abuse that actually exists in this world like that, but not on that level. This is cartoonish level. Alright, see you in part 3. I'm out. See you soon. Goodbye.